Om Tavagatamratam Tapta Jivanam Kaviviridinam Kalvashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimatatam Bhuvivananti Purirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're at the bottom of page 204. This is the chapter Advice to the Brahmos, and the date is Sunday, April 8th, 1883. We're in the middle of a conversation. Manilal Malik is there, and there's other devotees. It doesn't say anyone specifically here. Ignorance lasts as long as one has ego. There can be no liberation so long as the ego remains. O God, thou art the doer and not I. That is knowledge. Of course, this is a very big topic. And Thakur, he generally follows this up by saying, but one cannot get rid of the ego. So we have this dilemma, that we can't have the highest realization as long as the ego is there, but this ego comes back. We can argue it away and reason about it, but it seems to come back. So generally, he'll make a distinction between different types of ego. And when we read about this unripe ego and the ripe ego, we have to understand that there's every possible stage in between. Just as a fruit or a vegetable will start out green, it doesn't just go from green to ripe. It may take several days, day after day, a green banana, and then the next thing you know, it's fully ripened. It may take several days. So there are all different degrees of this ripeness of the ego. And what Thakur recommends is that we try to assume the attitude that one who really has the ripe ego will have. This is his technique. We'll see many times how he instructs us to take a certain spiritual attitude and superimpose it upon our ordinary attitude and cover it over and replace it. This is called aropkara. He uses this expression over and over again so that I may not really feel I'm a child of God, but I tell myself that. I may not really feel I'm the servant of God. I tell myself that. I try to behave that way. I try to think of an example. I try to feel I'm like Hanuman. I try to feel that I'm really a small child, depending on my mother for everything. So this is still an ego, but this is that ripe ego, and this is this difference between avidya and vidya, shakti, vidya maya. There are different types of maya, even. That some of it helps us get out of maya, the thorn that removes the thorn. But ultimately, we have to transcend this ego. Ultimately, we have to at least get rid of this unripe ego. There's a conversation that takes place between Sri Ramakrishna and Keshav Chandrasen. And Keshav says, what happens when we get rid of both of them? We go beyond, get rid of both thorns, and we give up even this ripe ego. And Thakur knew that he was nervous. And he said, Keshav, I'm not asking you to give up the ego entirely. You can keep that ripe ego, it's okay. Because Keshav was saying, can one keep his organization together if one reaches to that high state? Thakur knew that he still had some desire like that. He said, no, I'm not telling you to give up this ego entirely. Give up this unripe ego. And for us, we need a very strong sense of ego, a very strong sense of I. We have to know who we are, who we want to be. Knowing who we are, from a very practical point of view, will be, okay, we know our weaknesses, we know our good points, we know our bad points and all of that, but know who we want to be. This is what we have to focus on, and we have these paradigms, all of these bhavas, Vatsalya bhava, Sakya bhava, all of these, they have their paradigms. So we feel, yes, how did Mother Yashoda feel when she had baby Gopala on her lap? How did she feel? Let me try to feel the way she felt. So this was usually what Thakur says about the ego. Now he's going to this other attitude, a very high attitude, that this is something that the Shaktas emphasize so much, that I'm just an instrument, that the Mother does everything for me. Or in the Sankhya philosophy we read in Gita, that just body, mind, senses, everything is functioning, I'm something separate from that. I am not the agent of action. Or God alone is the agent of action, whatever attitude we have. But he says that this is that very high attitude, and it's very hard to take this attitude in the very beginning. We can pray, let me be an instrument. But to say at this point, whatever I do, I'm doing because Mother is making me do it, that we have to have tremendous purity of motive if we're able to say that. We can't have any selfish motive or any desires lurking behind anything. Then possibly if we do things that we really feel will be the best possible thing to do, that this we can say that this is somehow our attempt to act according to the will of God as we understand it. But it's not the same as Thakur being able to say, I move as Mother makes me move, I speak as she makes me speak, is a different thing. By being lowly, one can rise high. The chatak bird makes its nest on low ground, but it soars very high in the sky. Cultivation is not possible on high land. In low land, water accumulates and makes cultivation possible. He's talking about humility. This pride, when he talks about ego, ignorance lasts as long as one has ego, we can take it also as meaning pride. And this pride comes from identifying with the external things, how much money we have, how much learning we have, how many degrees we have, position, all of these things that become great obstacles for us. So he doesn't often talk about this very humble type of attitude, oh, I'm nothing, I'm a sinner, this and that. But at the same time, we should understand that no reason for us to be proud of anything. Whatever we have, good qualities or virtues, we can say by Thakur's grace we have these. No reason to be proud for these things. One must take the trouble to seek the company of holy persons. In his own home, a man hears only worldly talk. The disease of worldliness has become chronic with him. This is a very nice expression, again, one of Thakur's favorite expressions, that we know a chronic condition can't be cured. We have a certain condition, and we can take some medication and we can cure it. If we don't, and it lasts for a certain amount of time, and we don't do anything to counteract it, it can become chronic. Legeachi, he says. Legeachi. That so with worldliness, unless we try to combat it, it becomes a chronic condition for us. That it becomes part of who we are. It's very difficult to get rid of it. So he's saying, by only hearing worldly talk, by not removing ourselves from time to time, and keeping holy company, reading holy books, whatever it is that we do, by doing that we can cure that disease of worldliness. The caged parrot sitting on its perch repeats Rama Rama, but let it fly to the forest and it will squawk in its usual way. Mere possession of money doesn't make a nobleman. One sign of the mansion of a nobleman is that all the rooms are lighted. The poor cannot afford much oil and consequently cannot have so many lights. The shrine of the body should not be left dark. One should illumine it with the lamp of wisdom. I think what Thakur is saying is that those who possess some spirituality, it will have to manifest itself. in some way. We'll have to see that light shining somehow. That this will be the glory of that spiritual realization that they have. And then he quotes a song, lighting the lamp of knowledge in the chamber of your heart. Behold the face of the mother, Brahman's embodiment. Everyone can attain knowledge. Now, when he says knowledge, of course, he means spiritual realization. He's not talking about any type of worldly knowledge. I don't believe he's even talking about any type of Vedantic knowledge. We have so many very subtle Vedantic concepts and things, how we understand the difference between the subtle body and the gross body and the three, all of these things. I don't think he means that. When he says everyone can attain knowledge, that means everyone can attain illumination. Everyone can have realization, even those who don't care for philosophy or anything, just strictly have a devotional attitude. There are two entities, Jivatma, the individual soul, and Paramatma, the supreme soul. Through prayer, all individual souls can be united to the supreme soul. Every house has a connection for gas, and gas can be obtained from the main storage tank of the gas company. Apply to the company, and it will arrange for your supply of gas. Then your house will be lighted. Now, are there two entities? First of all, if the Jivatma is separate from the individual soul, from the Paramatma, then there'll have to be many Jivatmas. It won't just be mine. If mine is separate, then this is, we can understand this in two ways. From the Vyavaharika point of view, see, the Advaita Vedantins, they very often speak from this ordinary point of view where we feel separate. We feel separate from God. Think of the allegory we have of the two birds on the same tree. Okay, I feel that I'm the lower bird, I want to unite with the higher bird. Now, Swamiji explains that according to Advaita Vedanta, when the lower bird really reaches the higher bird, it realizes that they were never separate. There was only one. Now, the other way of understanding this is either Sankhya point of view or the more dualistic point of view. Dualists or qualified non-dualists who will really feel that the jiva is a distinct entity. The qualified non-dualists will say that it's like a light, a ray of light emanating from the sun. There'll be many different ones. Each one of us is like one of them. We're connected to the sun. We're composed of the same. The dualists will say more like sparks coming out of a fire. Still, it has that same nature of the fire, but it's separate from it. So one is part the whole and the other is separation. The Advaitins will say that the jiva is just a reflection of the sun. And there's only one sun that way. So when Thakur makes statements like this, there's some people jump to this conclusion that, oh, he was really a qualified non-dualist. Many people say that. Even M had that feeling. When we read in the Bengali Gospel, there'll be these subtitles and things. And sometimes it'll say Thakur's teaching of Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. Now we know that it can be true. It is his teaching of that, but he taught according to what was helpful to different people. He didn't teach according to what he thought was the final and absolute truth. He didn't have that conception of truth. His conception of truth was direct realization and experience. And everything other than that is just trying to explain some type of understanding of the universe, of the self and God and all of that, to help us understand the experience that we had, that feeling of oneness. Is it oneness? Is it identity? Is it union? These are all descriptions after the fact. In that state of realization, well, there's no one there to say which one is it really. We get so lost in the object of love, or we feel that absolute oneness, that at that point there's no one to say anything. But this is a very nice way of understanding it. That I feel this separation, this goes back to this idea of ego. when he says we can't get rid of this ego, he says that it's the ego that causes this feeling of difference, of separation. But we can utilize it. We can feel, yes, okay, I am that lower bird. Let me hop higher and higher and higher and higher and reach that state of union with the higher bird. Then what happens, happens. If I realize that I was always one with that bird, or I'm a part of that bird, or I came from that bird, who cares? Whatever happens, happens. If we need to know, then we'll know at that time. If we don't need to know, we may not know, we may not care to know also. When we finally meet Jadu Malik, we can ask him how much money he has and how many gardens and this and that, or we may not want to. We may not care. It doesn't matter. In some, spiritual consciousness has already been awakened, but they have special marks. They do not enjoy hearing or talking about anything but God. They are like the Chatak, which prays for rainwater, though the 7 oceans, the Ganges, the Jamuna, and the rivers near it are all filled with water. It won't drink anything but rainwater, even though its throat is burning with thirst. The master wanted to hear a few songs. Ramlal and the Brahmin official of the temple garden sang. Ramlal was Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, of course, who lived with him for many, many years in Dakshineshwar, and remained close. He was one of the few relatives that had a nice relationship with the monks of the order, especially Swami Brahmananda. Swami Brahmananda, for some reason, was very devoted to Ramlal. I don't know why exactly. Ramlal, he wasn't very helpful when after Thakur passed away and Holy Mother was supposed to get his stipend and everything. But anyhow, Swami Ramananda, there's one reminiscence. It's a little off topic, but I don't remember who it was. But Swami Ramananda told one brahmachari that it was a festival day, Thakur's birthday, I believe, and he was in charge of kind of guarding the shrine room. This is before the big temple. And he said, don't let anybody eat food in the shrine room area. I think something like that. I may not have the details 100% right. So one family came, and so some girls were there, this and that, and either they wanted to or they started eating there, and this brahmachari said, no, you're not allowed to. And so they got very offended, and they got down and they left. Then later Swami Ramananda called that brahmachari, and he said, what did you do? And he said, I told them they couldn't go there. He said, you have to leave the order. Yeah, he was very angry. And he said, whoa, what happened? He said, this was Ramlal's family, his children, that came. Thakur's very own relatives that you did that to. And he said, how did I know? And so he felt terrible. And then Swami Brahmananda said, see if you can get them to accept your apology. So he had to go, he crossed the Ganges, he went to Dakshineshwar, and I don't remember the whole story. Somebody else was there. Maybe he met Lakshmi Didi or something. Somebody was there who he didn't know at that time, but she took care of it. She took his side and explained everything. Finally, reluctantly, they accepted his apology, and they arranged for some feast, something like that, and the brahmachari was allowed to stay. So the Swami Brahmananda, he liked to travel with him because he could sing. If anybody could sing, Swami Brahmananda liked him. He always wanted his attendants who could sing nicely, the Swami Ambikananda especially, and others. And the Ramlal, he was a character. He would dress up in a sari and sing songs, the women's songs sometimes also. So Ramlal and a Brahmin official of the temple garden sang, dwell, O Lord, O lover of bhakti, in the Vrindavan of my heart, and my devotion unto thee will be thy Radha, dearly loved. And again, the dark cloud of the summer storm fades into nothingness, when, flute in hand and a smile on his lips, lighting the world with his loveliness, Krishna, the dark one, appears. His dazzling yellow robe outgleams even the lightning's glare. A wreath of wild flowers interwoven gently swings from his youthful breast and softly kisses his feet. See, there he stands, the Lord of life, the moon of Nanda's line, outshining all the moons in heaven, and with the splendor of his rays, flooding the Yamuna's bank. He stands there, stealing the maidens' hearts. He lures them from hearth and home. Krishna enters his own heart's shrine, and with his flute note steals away my wisdom, life, and soul. To whom shall Ganga Narayana pour out his tale of woe? Ah, friend, you might have understood had you but gone to the Jamuna's bank to fill your water jar. These are beautiful songs. The one great thing about this Chaitanya tradition, of course, there are many great things, but the large number of songs that were composed, and the Chaitanya tradition, this was really the beginning of this whole idea of something like a historical biography, because there were several that were done in Bengali and Sanskrit also on the life of Chaitanya Deva, and there were so many songs composed either about him or about this Radha Krishna episode, and other great Chandidas. There were so many great poets. Many of them wrote in this kind of medieval Bengali, Maithili and other things like that. But any other beautiful songs. You know, we read about Swamiji and hear about Swamiji, so masculine and strong, and he didn't like his mother, Baba. But how many times, if you go through the gospel, you'll see how many times Swamiji sang these songs, these Vaishnava songs, and sometimes with tears in his eyes also. Again they sang, high in the heaven of the mother's feet, my mind was soaring like a kite, when came a blast of sin's rough wind that drove it swiftly toward the earth. Master to the devotees. As the tiger devours other animals, so does the tiger of zeal for the Lord eat up lust, anger, and the other passions. Once the zeal grows in the heart, lust and the other passions disappear. The gopis of Vrindavan had that state of mind because of their zeal for Krishna. I think the term that Thakur is using here is anurag. This anuraga is a very intense type of the highest type of spiritual love. And this was Thakur's attitude, that trying to combat the pull of the senses and desires and all of the passions just through willpower. There's vairagya, just to abhyas and vairagya. These are the two things that are supposed to be enough to control the mind, and so that we're not at the mercy of all of these desires. Thakur says no, that we have to have something pulling in the other direction, this anuraga. And this is what will devour. The others will suppress them and will fight against them. This can devour them, eat them up. But this is not an easy thing. This is the vyakulata, this anuraga, this is the final stage in the spiritual life, at least on the path of devotion. So the tiger of this anuraga, tiger of zeal for the Lord, eats up lust, anger, and the other passions. Yeah, the great mistake that took place in many of these Vaishnava traditions is that this very pure, lustless love. These were children, they were young teenagers. The type of love that the gopis had for Sri Krishna, it got sexualized a little bit, and many of these kind of tantric ideas came in and everything, and it got a little bit polluted that way. But Thakur was saying that these gopis of Vrindavan, they were perfectly pure. I often think about these poor young girls. These would have been arranged marriages to some older men, and they have to move in and live in some place. They don't have access to their own mother and father, and have to work very hard. The mother-in-law will give them lots of work to do. And maybe the husband is someone they've never seen before, that they're afraid of and everything. And they have this young boy, Krishna, so charming, and they just can't wait to go out and spend time with him. Again, the zeal for God is compared to collyrium, Radha, said to her friends, "I see Krishna everywhere." They replied, "Friend, you have painted your eyes with the collyrium of love. That is why you see Krishna everywhere." This is a very beautiful, another beautiful idea, that Radha had this same phenomenon that we see with Sri Ramakrishna, which is called udipana. Udipana, that they see something and it triggers something. And with Radha, with almost anything, wherever she looked, the mind was reminded of Krishna somehow. And this udipana, it works in a very positive way, and I don't want to say a negative way, but because the negative way is also positive. But something can remind us of something, or it can remind us of the absence of something. The absence of someone. The presence of someone or the absence of someone. With Sri Ramakrishna, generally it was this other way. Generally, he would see something, say he was in the Maidan one day, and there was some fair going on, something like that, and he saw an English boy who was leaning against a tree, bent in three places, the way that we see images of Krishna. So immediately he thinks of Krishna, goes into ecstasy. Now, this other idea, this is called Viraha Bhava. It's part of this Madhur Bhava, is that Radha seeing this dark rain cloud, she'll think of Krishna, but she'll be missing him because she's not seeing him and longing to see him. There's a very beautiful song. This is a kind of a funny thing. This idea came to me that many love songs, if we look at it from a spiritual point of view, can be very deep and very meaningful. One of our Swamis, some of you either knew him or knew about him, Swami Atmajnanananda, he passed away very recently. He wrote that book, Six Lighted Windows and other things. He told me one time that he loved to listen to these old songs, these old love songs, and think of them, in a spiritual way. One song he told me he really liked was, "Embrace me, my sweet embraceable you." And he said, yes, that we can think embracing the mother, the lyrics to it. Anyhow, it reminded me of one song. This song is called, what is the name of it? "I'll Be Seeing You." And it's about either the man or the woman, it can be sung by either one, who is missing the beloved. And I'll be seeing you everywhere I look, I'll be reminded of you, I'll be seeing you. And then the final line, it says, "I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you." And just like Radha, when she would see the dark rain cloud, when she would see the peacock feathers and everything, immediately the mind would go to Krishna. But this feeling of longing to have a union, this viraha bhava, is a very powerful type of thing. Now the challenge for us, of course, we all understand this. We all know what it means to miss somebody, to long for somebody. Say we're separated, someone may die, someone may just be on a different continent, even. People break up, all different things happen, and we know sometimes how the heart aches to be reunited with someone. Aches to be reunited with someone. Now what Thakur says is we have to somehow utilize that feeling. We know how the heart feels when it's longing for union, but we have to spiritualize that. How do we do it? How do we look at this example of Radha, how she's longing to be reunited with Krishna, and how do we do that? Or we think, oh, when I was young, I had a friend who moved away, and how I long to be with my friend. How do we do that with God? Try to convince ourselves that, yes, this is the real longing of the heart, to be united, because we know these emotions. This is the beauty of the devotional path and the different bhavas, because we all know what it means for the child to love the mother, for the mother to love the child, for the two friends, boyhood friends. There's no friendship like young friendship. The friendship that kids have when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. You don't get friends like that later in life. There's something very sweet and very close about it, closer than brothers or sisters or anything. So we know all of that. We know those emotions. We don't know how to love God except through this human love. This is the whole point of it. So we aropkora. We try to utilize that feeling, but give it a twist, give it a turn, so that we can really feel that tremendous longing for union with God. And of course, if we do it in a very personal way, we look upon God as Krishna also, or Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, however we understand it, then we can really feel. Think how wonderful it would be if one day we would really feel, how tremendous it would be if I could go and see Thakur, see Mother. How the heart is yearning for that type of experience. Of course, we don't have it because we don't have enough faith that we can actually see them and have that experience. This is also part of the problem. But we know when all of the disciples left Sri Ramakrishna, how they only thought about when they would go back to see him again. This is Viraha Bhava. That many of them said that. Swami Atmajnananda. The second we left, M also, that all we could think about was when will we have that blessed opportunity to be in his company again. So we have to try to superimpose their mindset on ours. Somehow. It's a challenge. But this is the whole concept behind this Bhakti Yoga, as taught in this, especially in this Vaishnava tradition, with these different bhavas. It's a very powerful type of spiritual practice. They say that when your eyes are painted with collyrium made from the ashes of a frog's head, you see snakes everywhere. So, yeah, and Thakur, I think he'll say it later here also, they had this idea that people who had jaundice saw everything as yellow. Yeah, I don't think it's true, but I had jaundice once. Yeah, hepatitis, yeah. I didn't see anything as yellow. But everything about me looked yellow. That was a different thing. But anyhow, the point is that, we see God everywhere. If the mind is filled with God, the lover is constantly seeing the beloved at every turn. Oh, is that her? Is that him? So this is that collyrium, because the eyes are painted, that black line that goes around the eye. They are indeed bound souls who constantly dwell with lust and gold and do not think of God even for a moment. How can you expect noble deeds of them? They are like mangoes pecked by a crow, which may not be offered to the deity in the temple, and which even men hesitate to eat. Bound souls, worldly people, are like silkworms. The worms can cut through their cocoons if they want, but having woven the cocoons themselves, they are too much attached to them to leave them, and so they die there. This is what we do. We spend all of our time and energy to earn money to buy something, a big house, something like that, and start a business or something, and we get so attached to it that we can't get out of it. And what we thought was some very positive thing becomes a great burden, and we're constantly worried about it, and competition and all sorts of things come. It is Maya that deludes. Only a few become spiritually awakened and are not deluded by the spell of Maya. They do not come under the control of lust and gold. There are two classes of perfect souls: those who attain perfection through spiritual practice and those who attain it through the grace of God. Now, we may wonder why Thakur says this. At other times he'll talk about other types. He'll talk about those who even attain perfection in dream, swapna siddha, and some who get it all at once, hatat siddha. some kripa siddha, sadhana siddha. It goes all different. But if we take all of the others, they don't involve that tremendous effort. This is the one. This is why we can say that there are two different categories. That this sadhana siddha, this means that we have to struggle. We have to struggle very hard. We see some people that it looks like they're not struggling so much, or some people they seem to stumble upon it. They just have some type of spiritual experience. This can be explained, of course, by what was done in a previous lifetime, or we might want to just say the grace of God. But everyone who attains perfection attains it through the grace of God. Because it's through the grace of God that we even begin our spiritual life. No one will do sadhana without getting the grace of God. The grace of God is that desire for God realization. Unless we get that at the very beginning, no one will do it. And no ultimate realization will come without the grace of God, because we have to transcend this feeling of agency and this idea that I'm the one who's doing it. So the grace of God will come with all of them. But one requires a lot of hard work. And very few people can just rely on the grace of God. We have to do our work. But there's always that combination. This is why Thakur likes the illustration of the boatman. He has to work very hard to, the boat is tied to the dock, to untie the whole thing and to get it out, and he has to use the oars and row it out, and then to get the sail up, very hard work. But once everything's up, then the breeze takes it the rest of the way. He can sit back. So there's always this type of combination. But some have done the hard work earlier, and for some it seems like they don't have to do very much. And this breeze of grace automatically comes. So there'll be this kripa siddha. Some farmers irrigate their fields with great labor. Only then can they grow crops. But there are some who do not have to irrigate at all. Their fields are flooded by rain. They don't have to go to the trouble of drawing water. One must practice spiritual discipline laboriously. So what is he saying here? Don't count on being one who doesn't have to do any work. Let's assume that we're going to fall in the first category, that we have to work hard. One must practice spiritual discipline laboriously in order to avoid the clutches of Maya. Those who attain liberation through the grace of God do not have to labor, but they are few indeed. And as I said before, this laboring part is only the first half of it. The grace will automatically come if we do our part. Okay, now there'll be another category. Then there's the class of the ever-perfect. So we have sadhana siddha, we have kripa siddha, and now nitya siddha. Sadhana siddha, through great effort, they can attain some type of realization. And kripa siddha, through grace of God. And this nitya siddha, those who are eternally perfect, or at least were born perfect. We may get our realization in this lifetime and have some desire to work for the welfare of others, and the next birth, if we're born again, will be considered nitya siddha, because we won't be born because of karma. We'll be born already after having attained realization. So this nitya siddha, the ever perfect, they are born in each life with their spiritual consciousness already awakened. Awakened, yes, but a little shaking off of the dust of Maya will be there. And in the case of the direct disciples, of course, they had to do a lot of strenuous spiritual practice. But even if it were possible to be born with the absolute knowledge of oneness or illumination, still the mind has to mature to a certain extent. We can't expect an infant who is not yet able to speak or think or do anything. They may be in some very primal state of oneness in the beginning, but it'll take some time after that when they'll have to develop some reflective nature, it's at least a reflective nature. But then this will come more smoothly and they'll remember more easily. In the case of the direct disciples, they also had to reach a very high state because they were the ones who were to carry the message of Sri Ramakrishna. And they also had to provide an example for us of how one has to strive and do spiritual practice. Think of a spring whose outlet is obstructed. So they're also born with some little bit of Maya obstructing it. While looking after various things in the garden, the plumber accidentally clears it and the water gushes out. Yeah, we had that happen in our bathroom the other day. The sink got knocked over and the water gushed out. Yet people are amazed to see the first manifestations of an ever-perfect soul's zeal for God. So there are signs. It may not be that automatically is God realization, but look at Swamiji, Narendra, how from his childhood, how something drove him. He was just driven to go deep and practice meditation. And as a teenage boy, going around from place to place, sir, have you realized God? Have you seen God? That doesn't come from nowhere, that tremendous longing that way. So we may say, oh, well, he wasn't illumined, he was still looking for God. But it's manifesting itself this way, as that tremendous longing for God. So Thakur says, yet people are amazed to see the first manifestations of an ever-perfect soul's zeal for God. He's not saying realization at this point. Zeal for God. They say, where was all this devotion and renunciation and love? The conversation turned to the spiritual zeal of devotees as illustrated in the earnestness of the gopis of Vrindavan. Again, Ramlal will sing. This, what Thakur was so insistent on was this longing of the heart. I always appreciate this conversation he had with Keshav Chandra Sen, and the other Brahmos. He said, I know you don't believe in all this stuff, this Radha Krishna business, and you don't especially like it and everything, and did it really happen, or is it just the poetry, just somebody's imagination? I'm not asking you to look at it from that point of view, that Krishna is God himself. Forget about all of that. Try to understand, even if it's poetry, the yearning of the heart that Radha had to realize Krishna. And try to incorporate that into your spiritual life. You'll get tremendous benefit from that. So this was Thakur's attitude. This is why he loved this so much. So Ramlal is singing again. Thou art my all in all, O Lord, the life of my life, the essence of my essence. In the three worlds I've none else but thee to call my own. Thou art my peace, my joy, my hope. Thou my support, my wealth, my glory. Thou my wisdom and my strength. Thou art my home, my place of rest, my dearest friend, my next of kin. My present and my future, thou, my heaven and my salvation. Thou art my scriptures, my commandments. Thou art my ever-gracious Guru. Thou the spring of my boundless bliss. Thou art the way and thou the goal. Thou the adorable one, O Lord. Thou art the mother tender-hearted. Thou the chastising father. Thou the creator and protector. Thou the helmsman who dost steer my craft across the sea of life. Master to the devotees. Ah, what a beautiful song. Thou art my all in all. Ramlal sang again, this time describing the pangs of the gopis on being separated from their beloved Krishna. There's a footnote. We find this in Viraha Bhava while Sri Krishna was living in Vrindavan and when they had their Ras Leela and all of that, but also when he got a little bit older and he was old enough to assume his role as a king. He had to go to Mathura. And then they missed him and they lost him, but they lost him in a different way also, because even when they went to see him, they said, well, this isn't our Govinda. Who is this big shot with the turban and everything, and the royal dress and everything? This is not the one that we fell in love with before. So they also had that type of separation. But this song is about just when Sri Krishna is about to leave Vrindavan to go to Mathura. Hold not the chariot's wheels. So the gopis are there. We can picture that he's in a chariot, and they're trying to hold on to the wheels to keep them from moving, so that if they can hold it, then he won't be able to leave. Huh? Hold not the chariot's wheels. Is it the wheel that makes it move? The mover of its wheels is Krishna, by whose will the worlds are moved. So don't think that it's just the charioteer who's doing all of this. You have to understand that your Krishna is Ishvara himself, by whose will everything takes place. The master went into deep samadhi. His body was motionless. He sat with folded hands, as in his photograph. Tears of joy flowed from the corners of his eyes. After a long time, his mind came down to the ordinary plane of consciousness. See, Thakur, he was so similar in many ways to Chaitanya Deva and Radha and all of that, but his Viraha Bhava, he didn't have it the same way. The curious thing with Chaitanya Deva is that even after his realization, he would go back and forth. Just as Radha, sometimes she could be with Krishna, sometimes she was stuck at home. So sometimes he would feel that divine presence, and other times he would feel the pangs of separation, terrible pangs of separation. Sri Ramakrishna, he had that intense longing for realization, but once he had that, we don't find him ever feeling that sense of separation. He may switch to another type of spiritual practice, and especially because this is not an attitude that accompanies this Shantan Bhav, that this relationship between the child and the mother. We don't have anything in the scriptures, a little bit that the child is out to play and forgets the mother, and then starts crying and longs for the mother, but she comes immediately. There's not this tremendous pathos and this feeling that when will I ever see my Krishna again, all of that. So Thakur, he was always filled with joy. All of the Udipana brought him great bliss. This other type of attitude is a little bit painful. That's why this Vyakulata is not something that we should be very flippantly praying for. How many of us can bear the burning pain? Thakur experienced these things. Physically, the body would be burning. We can't imagine how, in Thakur's life, how everything so literally came true, how these things really happened. How the Brahmini couldn't touch his body, it was so hot, with her hands would burn. She had to put a cloth around him. How Thakur would lie on the ground in the mud and it would become caked from the burning heat of his body. He had to spend the whole day in the Ganges just to get some coolness, or they had to put sandal paste on his body. So is this what we're praying for, that Vyakulata like that? That agony at not having realized God is very rare. We can pray for longing for God, and this anuraga, of course. But this is something that most people won't be able to bear. Okay, where was I? The master went into deep samadhi. His body was motionless. He sat with folded hands, as in his photograph. Tears of joy flowed from the corners of his eyes. After a long time, his mind came down to the ordinary plane of consciousness. He mumbled something, of which only a word now and then could be heard by the devotees in the room. He was saying, "Thou art I, and I am thou. Thou eatest, thou, I eat. What is this confusion thou hast created?" This is that play that takes place between this bhavamukha state. If he goes a little bit in one direction, then there's only oneness. A little bit in the other direction, then the mother and child are there. Is it the child, Thakur feeding the mother dwelling within? Is it the mother feeding Thakur as the child within? That confusion comes a little bit. It's not real confusion. This is Leela, this play, the type of confusion in his mind. Who is the real doer? Who is the enjoyer? When he goes in the other direction a little bit, then everything is oneness. Mother alone is there. Continuing, the master said, I see everything like here it is, like a man with a jaundiced eyes. I see thee alone everywhere. And then he goes back to this feeling of Krishna. O Krishna, friend of the lowly, O eternal consort of my soul, O Govinda. As he uttered the words, eternal consort of my soul, and Govinda, the master again went into samadhi. There was complete silence in the room. The eager and unsatiated eyes of the devotees were fixed on the master, a God-man of infinite moods. How easily he goes back and forth between there's a mood of Radha and Krishna, and then there's a mood of the Divine Mother and their child. So he easily goes back and forth. Adhur Sen, okay, we met him earlier. He had just come for the first visit. Adhur Sen arrived with several of his friends. He was a deputy magistrate, about 30 years old. He had a very good position for someone his age. He had a chance to get a big position. That's one of the little dramas that takes place in the gospel. There's a back and forth about that. It says, this was his second visit to the master. He was accompanied by his friend Sharada Charan, who was extremely unhappy because of the death of his eldest son. A retired deputy inspector of schools, Sharada Charan devoted himself to meditation and prayer. Adhar had brought his friend to the master for consolation in his afflicted state of mind. Coming down from samadhi, the master found the eyes of the devotees fixed on him. He muttered to himself, still in an abstracted mood. When Thakur came down from samadhi, he didn't immediately go into some ordinary state of consciousness. He would still have that inebriation, that nasha, that inebriation from that divine state. And this is when the words of wisdom would flow. These were the nicest times, when he would come down from that state, and then really some inspired state when he would speak to the devotees. Then addressing the devotees, Sri Ramakrishna said, the spiritual wisdom of worldly people is seen only in rare occasions. It is like the flame of a candle. No, it is rather like a single ray of the sun passing through a chink in a wall. Worldly people chant the name of God, but there is no zeal behind it. It is like children swearing by God, having learnt the word from the quarrels of their aunts. Worldly people have no grit. Now, this was another favorite expression of Sri Ramakrishna. That urok, he would say, kub rok chai, urok, that we really have to have that adamant determination. That I don't care what anybody says or how many obstacles come, I am not going to give up. This is grit. Worldly people have no grit. If they succeed in an undertaking, it is all right, but if they don't succeed, it scarcely bothers them at all. When they need water, they begin to dig a well, but as soon as they strike a stone, they give up digging there and begin at another place. Perhaps they come to a bed of sand. Finding nothing but sand, they give that place up too. How can they succeed in getting water unless they continue to dig persistently where they started? This has a second element to it. Another great teaching that once we accept one spiritual path, we shouldn't jump from one thing to another and to another. We have to stick with it. But we may strike sand, we may hit the rocks and stone. We still have to keep working at it. Man reaps the harvest of his own past actions. Hence you read in the song, O mother, I have no one else to blame. Alas, I sink in the well these very hands have dug. We have to accept the fact that whatever we've done in the past has created the present for us. And yet, we have to have the strength of mind and perseverance that we're going to do everything we can not to repeat those mistakes and to reinvent ourselves. I and mine, that is ignorance. By discriminating, you will realize that what you call I is really nothing but Atman. Reason it out. Are you the body or the flesh or something else? At the end you will know that you are none of these. You are free from attributes. So now he switched to the highest point of view of the jnani. And after all of that devotion, that this I that is trying to think of himself as the beloved of Krishna and everything, now he says you try to find it. You won't find it. Huh? What is this I? This false identification with all of the sheaths, the body, the mind, the senses, and everything else. False identification. If you try to find it, you won't find it. It'll disappear. Then you look away for a minute and it comes back. It sneaks back into the room. But you look for it, you won't find it. He said, you try to find it, you'll find God in its place. There's the real I, the real consciousness, the real self. So at the end, you will realize, you will know that you are none of these. You are free from attributes, nirupati. There are no, all of the upatis belong to the body, the mind, the senses. They don't belong to the self. The self is the witness. Self is free, perfectly pure. Then you will realize that you have never been the doer of any action. Even the agency, this is a function of mind. The mind, buddhi, all of these, they make the decisions and everything. That you are beyond righteousness and unrighteousness. From ignorance a man says, this is gold and this is brass, but a man of knowledge says, it is all gold. This means seeing that one reality everywhere, manifest everywhere. Reasoning stops when one sees God. This is this role of vichara. This vichara actually is meant to remove false misconceptions. It's meant to remove, it's not, through reasoning we can't realize our oneness with God. Through reasoning we can realize that we're not any of these other things. We can remove all of the upatis, then that knowledge dawns of its own. So that reasoning stops then, when one sees God. But there are instances of people who have realized God and who still continue to reason. This will be, what will we do with this after this God realization? We'll still enjoy thinking about these things. There's some joy to even reading Gita. We read Thakur's teachings over and over and over again. Of course we get new light each time we do it, but there's great joy in it, and thinking about these ideas, and it goes a little deeper and deeper. So there are instances, and with good reason, of people who have realized God and who still continue to reason. Again, there are people who, even after having seen God, chant His name with devotion and sing His glories. The first will be this Vijnani who has the ego of knowledge, and the second the Vijnani who has the ego of devotion. How long does a child cry? So long as it is not sucking at its mother's breast. As soon as it is nursed, it stops crying. Then the child feels only joy. Joyously it drinks the milk from its mother's breast. But it is also true that while drinking, the child sometimes plays and laughs. It is God alone who has become everything. But in man, He manifests Himself the most. This is the Nara Lila. Thakur loved this idea. And Swamiji, of course. For Swamiji, it wasn't just seeing God dwelling in man, but worshiping God through service. So this, they both felt this is the highest vision of seeing God dwelling in all living beings. God is directly present in the man who has the pure heart of a child, and who laughs and cries and dances and sings in divine ecstasy. By this time, Sri Ramakrishna had become better acquainted with Adhar, who related the cause of his friend's grief. The master sang as if to himself. To arms, O man, now. He's taking a very militant attitude. Don't give in to this grief. He says, to arms, O men, death storms your house in battle array. Bearing the quiver of knowledge, mount the chariot of devotion. Bend the bow of your tongue with the bowstring of love, and aim at him the shaft of Mother Kali's holy name. Here is a ruse for the fray. You need no chariot or charioteer. Fight your foe from the Ganges bank, and he is easily slain. Then Thakur said, what can you do? Be ready for death. Death has entered the house. You must fight him with the weapon of God's holy name. God alone is the doer. I say, O Lord, I do as thou doest through me. I speak as thou speakest through me. I am the machine, and thou art the operator. I am the house, and thou art the indweller. I am the engine, and thou art the engineer. Give your power of attorney to God. One doesn't come to grief through letting a good man assume one's responsibilities. Let his will be done. This, of course, is one of the great challenges that we all face in life when someone very dear to us, a beloved family member, passes away. It's not easy for anybody. Thakur, see, he's in this semi-ecstatic state at this time. And he's speaking as if the Divine Mother is speaking. There are several instances like that. We'll continue with this next time. But it's exactly the right medicine for this devotee at that time. And sometimes we just have to take that heroic attitude that comes to everyone. To our near and dear ones and to ourselves. We have to be prepared for that. Anyhow, let us stop here and we'll do our closing prayer. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanukam Bhatudha Vai Ishavataram Parameshimediam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you, everyone, and may everyone stay well, and we will see you next